Welcome back to ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. This is Community Matters, and today we're going to talk about marijuana. We're going to talk about whether it's a good idea to have marijuana legalized on a recreational basis. And our special esteemed guest is Kevin Sabet, and he is the CEO of a couple of organizations around what we call marijuana policy and other policies related. And of course, Vicky Cayetano, our esteemed guest, who comes on our shows and always provides the view of the concerned citizen. So, Kevin, you were a featured speaker in a program organized by Steve Alm as prosecutor of Honolulu a couple of weeks ago in Waikiki. And the program was very impressive. The attendance was very impressive, and you were very impressive. Can you summarize the remarks you made at that program?
Yeah, no, well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with both of you. Aloha. It's wonderful that we're having this conversation. I wish more states that were contemplating this radical change, and it is a radical change, would have had this conversation. You know, today's marijuana is not Woodstock weed. I mean, that's the real reality here. We're not talking about the stuff that somebody might have smoked 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. We're talking about these super highly potent products that are found and infused in candies, cookies, lollipops, gummy bears, kid-friendly items, and are also vaporized and used. These 99% THC products that we know, have a really detrimental impact on your brain. So I talked about that. I talked about experiences of other states. Other states have seen an increase in young people using marijuana, high potent marijuana. They've seen an increase in young people and actually all people going to the emergency room because they get sort of a acute poisoning from the marijuana. So there's just been many issues that I think a lot of people don't quite realize. And the reality is, we're getting sold a false bill of goods with legalization. We don't get tax revenue because we end up paying for the actual policy itself, and the revenue doesn't come close. So we talked about all those issues. We talked about tourism as well, which is a very big issue. We had the many representatives from Japan tourism, Korean tourism, really talking about how this would have a detrimental effect on Hawaii's brand. We want to keep Hawaii, Hawaii, and that's really what it was about.
Vicky, what is Hawaii's brand about marijuana? You've been first lady of the state. You ran for governor. You're in touch with, how people feel. And how do you feel about recreational marijuana?
Well, I'm also an employer. And one of the concerns I have is safety at the workplace, drivers in particular. I'm afraid that the American public and people in Hawaii today don't really understand the full ramifications of what legalizing recreational marijuana would do. I have always supported medicinal marijuana, but recreational marijuana, that's a problem. And frankly, Jay and Kevin, I call it follow the money. And I believe that cigarette companies who have lost a huge market share now, right? Without everybody's down on cigarettes. I saw a video of commercials from, my era way back when, and you actually would see a doctor promoting Camel cigarettes as good for you. They're doing a number on the American public, and I'm sad to say that a lot of people are falling for it. But follow the money, and I think that's what a good part of this push to legalize recreational marijuana. That's what's behind it.
Let's assume it is that way, Vicky. Where does that take us? So what? They make money. Okay, let the record reflect that we are joined by the prosecutor for the city and county, Steve Alm, and he's the guy who organized that program in Waikiki we've been talking about with Kevin Sabet. Vicky was talking about the fact that tobacco companies are involved in this. And the last question I asked her, let's assume they make a lot of money. Do they bring dark forces to the proposition? Do they make it more or less dangerous if they get involved?
It is going to be society, the community that pays the price of this. We've seen this with cigarettes, and marijuana will be no different, perhaps worse even. And as I attributed to, the concerns that I would have as an employer, transportation safety, how it affects our children, employees, just a massive impact if you legalize recreational marijuana. And I would be very interested to hear Steve's perspective with his experience in this field as well.
We've heard from Kevin and we've heard from Vicky, only in small parts, really, of all the arguments and pros and cons that came up at the conference in Waikiki. But maybe you could step in and express your view of the matter and what concerns you about recreational marijuana.
Sure. Well, when I was a judge and a prosecutor, the focus was meth and coke and alcohol because people's lives were being ruined with that, and we didn't pay that much attention to marijuana. But when I saw the legislature actually, it got halfway through, it passed the Senate last session. About 3 months ago, we started doing research and looking into this, and it really, everything we're seeing is a problem. And what's different, and Colorado's got 10 years in, we can learn from it. But what really stood out that was different in talking to the visitor industry, they told us that if we're not a family-oriented place, people will stop coming. And that's why, Ted Kubo, who's head of JTB, and before the pandemic, they would bring in 500,000 Japanese visitors a year. They said they will stop coming. And Eric Takahata is involved in this as well. He just texted me today that he's in Japan right now, and they had a meeting with Japan Airlines, all Nippon Airways, Japan Association of Travel Agencies, 100% in opposition to this. Expedia, which is what hotels.com, they said that would be the kiss of death to tourism in Hawaii. So for all of the other moral reasons, the folks in Colorado said it would change the character of your city.
When Japanese tourists come here, and you as the prosecutor, you know this very well, they like to sample some of our illegal activities too. It's not all mom and pop and enjoy the kids. Some Japanese tourists come here, with trying to find the freedom that is offered in the U.S. How much of a factor is that?
I don't think it's a big factor because when they come here, they a small number, but they like to go shoot weapons at at gun ranges because they can't do that at home. But they almost never get arrested for crimes. They're more the victim of a crime. They are the exact kind of tourists we want. We do not want to become the Fort Lauderdale of the Pacific and have college students from California coming over here to Waikiki to get high and hardly spend any money. So I really think, as it's been described to me, in Japan, marijuana is put together with methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine. They're all dangerous drugs. And like Mr. Kubo said, if a celebrity gets caught with marijuana, their career is over. Mm-hmm. So whether, we think of it differently here in Hawaii, but I think one of the biggest problems is potency. And our legislators are thinking back to their high school or their parents' high school days when weed was 3%, and now it's 20, 30, 40%. It's a totally different drug.
If I tell you that the legislature would make this legal, but it would change the potency, does that change your view of what is it, Bill 669, Senate Bill 669, which will come back in one form or another in a few months? If I knock the potency down by half, would that make you more agreeable?
Not really, because I knew it would be a slippery slope and a stepping stone. So that would soon change. We'd hear some excuse the minute it's passed, some excuse by the pro-pot folks saying, no, actually, we need it to be increased because they would say the underground market, the black market is thriving. They're selling the higher potency stuff. So we need to compete. Now, there would be thing after the reality is the underground market in all the states that have legalized has not gone away. Drug dealers, they don't go to dental school when you legalize marijuana. They undercut the legal price and they sell it because the demand is through the roof. And really, the former First Lady is completely correct when it comes to the comparison with tobacco. And you asked, Jay, why that matters. That matters because the tobacco industry, like the marijuana industry, it's what we call addiction for profit. They rely on heavy consumers in order to make the majority of their money. It's Pareto's rule in economics and public policy, 80-20 rule. 20% of people consume 80% of the product. And that's the case with marijuana. They have an incentive to increase addiction and very heavy use. And we have to really think about if Hawaiian youth are going to be benefiting, especially in the global marketplace, when we are essentially encouraging them to get stoned more than maybe the culture already encourages it. And so there's really no good reason to do this other than to line the pocket of these major industries who really, it's capitalism gone wild. It's really not just, hey, they want to make a few bucks. They're like any other business. No, they're not.
Why am I reminded of the Sackler family?
It's OxyContin 2.0, the OxyContin legal drug pushed by the Sackler family, pushed by essentially a legal cartel. That's exactly the same thing with marijuana. It's happening across the country. And again, I think we need to keep Hawaii. That will fundamentally change a character. Listen, if you're really into smelling weed everywhere and going to pot shops, go to Venice Beach, California, sadly. Go to Manhattan. Unfortunately, you cannot escape the smell. By the way, the smell travels much further than tobacco smell. It lingers much longer, and it is much worse for you from a secondhand smoking perspective. New study just came out, 4 times worse, the secondhand smoke of marijuana, the carcinogens and other particulates in there. It's worse, by the way, than inhaling fire from, for example, the recent tragic wildfire that's still, in Maui. It's worse than that, and we know that that's bad. So this is a loser for our young people, the brain drain, our economic engine, and frankly, also for our environment, because marijuana is so thirsty. It requires a lot of energy, and it's not going to be helping anybody but the big folks who want to sell it.
Vicky, given these factors, I really wonder whether medicinal marijuana is strictly enforced, to the extent that we had hoped it would be, or whether it's a little loose on the part of the doctors who prescribe it and the regulators who regulate it. What do you think? Is medical marijuana being used recreationally?
I'd have to defer to Steve on that. I do think that there's just been proven studies and cases of people who benefit from medicinal marijuana. How strictly it's enforced, I'm sure they've got bigger challenges, to deal with, that perhaps it's not as strictly enforced. But this is one thing I want to point out, and put forward. How come nobody's talking about the secondhand smoke, as Kevin brought up? I mean, why should somebody like me who doesn't smoke at all have to be subjected to that? And I would also argue that marijuana is a precursor to all these other even more aggressive drugs. And again, I say, follow the money. And I think it's sad that society, why is it that so many young people support legalizing recreational marijuana? That points to another big problem. They want to check out. This is a big issue. We need all hands on deck to deal with all the problems we're facing here in our state, in our counties, and of course in the world. But you've got a generation where many of them feel like it's hopeless. They want to check out, and marijuana is a great way to get stoned and be out of it. I just can't emphasize enough how detrimental this would be.
Steve, isn't that true that we live in complex times? The generation who would be vulnerable to smoking recreational marijuana is under pressure. They don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. They worry about everything. Their world is coming apart. They need relief. What would you offer them if not marijuana?
How about exercise? How about watching movies? No, but it really, Kevin's research has shown that the fear of negatives of marijuana is going down at the same time as usage rates goes up. And that's really important, that across the country, any place where it's been legalized, and I don't like using the words recreational, because for some adults it is, But for many others, the teenagers going to the ER because they think they're going crazy with this more difficult drug. And I think it's totally naive to think you're going to be able to set this up to keep under 21-year-olds from using. That has never been the case with the alcohol. But that's what our legislative leaders are saying. Help us craft good guidelines. No place has done good guidelines. And why we would think Hawaii would be any different. I don't think you can legalize a powerful drug and make it available and do it safely. It's just impossible.
What about the gateway issue, Steve? That's been referred to here a couple of times. Is marijuana, in your experience, in your prosecutorial experience, a gateway drug?
I think it is, as far as if you're kind of diverting from mainstream society and you're not really happy with everything else, then you go there, and then you're exposed to other things. You're risk taking. You know, if you legalize this, like Portland, legalizing small possession of all drugs, including fentanyl and methamphetamine, they're having a tremendous increase. Nobody's going to treatment. I think they issued 4,000 citations and 40 people called the hotline, but they don't enforce it anyway. So I think it's just a bad idea any way you look at it. And the only thing they can point to is more tax money. But if you add up the emergency room visits and the fatal car crashes and the tourism, even that's not a winner.
How are we doing? I mean, there's always going to be a certain amount of progressive liberal pressure in the legislature to allow this. It's been building up for years, at least for the past 4 or 5 years since medicinal was permitted. And so query, where do we stand? Is the legislature buying that?
I'm hoping that Josh Green, smart guy, he's a doctor, that he can look at all of this research and understand this could be a fatal blow to our vibrant tourist economy. If the Japanese tourists, the Korean, they stop coming. And part of it is trying to educate the legislators. You saw at the event we had in Waikiki, very well attended by everyone except our legislators. I think there were two reps, one senator, and a couple of staff members for other people. To me, there's no excuse not having your staff there, even if you're going to be on the mainland. The situation now is not broken. People can find illegal weed if they want to. Anybody can go into a medical marijuana dispensary and say they've got headaches and they can get it. And yet we're not putting the societal stamp of approval, which kids are going to say, hey, they made it legal. It can't be that bad. So let's get high.
Well, I was saying that I really hope the governor heeds the advice of his peers in the medical profession. I mean, this is why it's kind of an astounding thing to think about. You could have a doctor, a medical doctor, professional, someone with great background, medical expertise, to even flirt with this idea is really unheard of. The American Medical Association, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the American Pediatric Association, on and on and on, are unanimous that marijuana legalization is a bad idea. Doesn't mean we want to criminalize people. No one is calling. I don't think the judge or anybody saying we need to, go and lock people up in prison, give people criminal records, go after cancer patients. No one is saying that by any means, but it's a false dichotomy to say we either have to criminalize people or we have to commercialize marijuana. Marijuana is already decriminalized in Hawaii. You will not go to prison. You will not go to jail. It's already, really, if you just kind of say you have a headache, you probably can get a medical card and get a medical marijuana, let's be honest. And if you can't figure out how to do that, you probably know somebody can get you marijuana. So there's no problem if you really want to access it. But why put the government stamp of approval, especially at a time when a governor is representing the medical profession in what he's doing? It just would make no sense to me.
In a certain sense, this is uphill because you do have Joe Biden trying to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Yeah. And, as we talked before the show, medical marijuana in general has become a politicized issue. Can you talk about that?
2 quick points on what you just talked about with the president. Let's be clear about what he did. So he hasn't done anything yet. His Health and Human Services Secretary kind of oddly publicly, it was a bit strange, publicly announced that they're recommending to the DEA and DOJ, Attorney General Merrick Garland, that this should be Schedule 3. So there's no final decision yet. It's still being discussed. Even if the Attorney General agrees, which I have my doubts. There are really no compelling reasons to reschedule marijuana. But let's say that they somehow agree and it's sort of been politicized. This is maybe a way to kind of split the baby because marijuana would not be legal. This does not legalize marijuana if you go Schedule 3. It makes the research a lot easier. And it also, unfortunately, gives some marijuana companies some tax breaks, which I don't think is a good idea. I think the last thing they need is a tax break. I think ordinary Americans need a tax break, but not the marijuana industry. But anyhow, so it would do some of these kind of technical things if it happens. We're still not there yet. We don't know if it will. I know multiple former heads of DEA, multiple former law enforcement members are raising objections right now with the attorney general saying, please, this is a bad idea. It's because it's going to send a wrong message. People are going to think it's legal, even if it's not. So you're sort of left with the worst of both worlds in some ways. And so we'll see. But you're right, Jay, there has been a general move to normalize and commercialize marijuana, because there is this very powerful industry and lobby that wants to make more money. It's what it comes down to, as the distinguished former First Lady said in the beginning of the program.
Distinguished First Lady, if I could ask you this question, what about the kids? I mean, how do they feel about it? What about the generation, we've been talking about? Do they want this to happen? Are they lobbying, advocating for it? Are they taking a position?
Exactly what you just said. Think about the children. I mean, we're already struggling in schools with many of our kids, with the distance learning, with the post-COVID world. And now you're adding this to say, to legalize marijuana. I mean, I think we need to really speak up, because as you can see from the studies, so many people are supporting it. And sorry to say that unless they've changed their tune, Josh Green and Kai Kahele both said that they would legalize recreational marijuana on the campaign trail. Now, perhaps that was to get votes. I don't know. I hope that common sense prevails and they'll change their position. But as I said, follow the money. And nobody's talking enough about what the cigarette companies are up to, because I believe it falls squarely on them. And they've put together a very good campaign strategy to influence legislators and other people, including the general public, to say this is harmless, it's good for you, it's going to be good, don't worry about it, and it's going to bring in a ton of money. And the only ton of money it brings in is to them.
Other people will say, well, follow the prosecutor, because the prosecutor is on the line here, the firing line. There are reasons within your office and within the prosecution of crimes in the state, within public order and public safety, as we have discussed before, that you would be concerned about. Can you describe what concerns you?
Well, everything that's happened in Colorado, we have more fatal car crashes. We don't have a test for it. So if somebody's driving, weaving in and out, and the police pull him over and he blows zeros, they know he's under the influence, or she, of something, but we don't have a test for it right now. So there's no way to bring that in. It's a cash business. So people try to hide where these grow fields are. They get robbed. The cartels have moved in on the mainland because they're the ones running it. I mean, they have taken over other people's plots and just said, we're in charge right now. California is full of that. And so part of it is our kids are going to get in, they think they can drive better. Great article the other day about a guy who's in this business who said, I'm assuming, I live in Colorado, I assume everybody on the street is stoned who's driving now. And it's a scary proposition. And there's some naive idea that Hawaii is going to be able to do this better than anywhere else. And it just is not the case. So we have problems with it but I think the thing is, people have not been educated. I didn't know all of this research until 3 months ago. We started looking at it. I don't think the legislators honestly have done it. And we've been starting to give Josh Green stuff to look at. And Scott Miskovich is, a very, very influential doctor. He was speaking at the conference about it, and he brings stuff up. Now, he works with some patients who have medical marijuana cards. So when you have a combination of a doctor, working with a patient, as I thought when I was on the bench, I'd rather have somebody who has an old motorcycle injury to their back. I'd rather have them smoking weed than on Vicodin and OxyContin that's going to cause them even more problems, but with a doctor's supervision.
Steve, if I'm drunk driving and an officer stops me, he can test me. He's got the kit in his car, and he's going to determine exactly what my blood alcohol level is. Is that also the case with marijuana? Is there presently a way where the courts will accept the technology to determine just exactly how much weed he's been smoking?
No, there isn't. And if you did a blood test, which we can't order people to do, you could see, is there THC there? But there's no correlation between it being there. Somebody could have smoked a joint 2 days ago and it's in there, or it's a regular drug user and it stays in there for a month. So right now there is no way to tell that. So it's a dangerous situation. What they're seeing on the mainland in these fatal car crashes, like in Colorado, is it's often a combination of cocaine and marijuana and something else. It's often a combination. Your reaction time is slowed down when you're high. I think there's this naive idea that you're a little paranoid, so you go slow and careful. That's fantasy stuff. Your reaction time is slowed down. You're distracted by other things. Driving under the influence of marijuana is no joke, and we are going to have more of it. It's been shown if you legalize it, usage rate among all age groups goes up. And that's going to be a real problem. As the First Lady said, our kids are behind in school because of COVID. The last thing we need to do is make it easier to get. The situation now is not broken. It's been decriminalized. People can get it if they want to. Let's not put our stamp of approval and get more kids using it.
For the past several years, call it the marijuana lobby, has been telling us that we ought to decriminalize recreational marijuana. From the moment, literally the moment that medical marijuana was permitted, that advocacy has gone on every day, every session. And that it won't stop in the session in 2024. That. But the question is there any set of circumstances, any time frame in which you might change your mind about this? Or is this a forever decision? What circumstances would soften your position?
With all that we know, and with history that we've learned from already with cigarettes, I do not know how I could ever change my position on something like this. And we're at a crossroads now, this next generation, where they've got so much that they're dealing with. And the most important thing is to help them deal with it, not giving them another way to check out, because that is not going to help them. I agree with Steve. You're going to see an upsurge in accidents. Like I said, as an employer, my drivers are driving huge trucks. These are weapons on the road if they're not driven, with a clear mind. And now we're legalizing marijuana. They can smoke it and they can drive this. Just imagine the consequences. People need to stop and think, and we need to speak up because too many people are not talking about this. And again, as I said, I look squarely at those cigarette companies and say, I know what you're up to. Follow the money.
Vicky, it's not only the cigarette companies. The people involved in the industry are looking to make big profit, whether they're cigarette companies or not. And that was visible when this whole initiative started before medical marijuana was approved. They were
Exactly.
business people first, and they wanted to make a big bottom line.
And if it gets legalized federally, Hawaii could be one of the prime producers of marijuana for the country or the world, right? We have a cachet, Puna Butter, Kona Gold, Maui, Kauai Electric. They used to send it out through the mails in huge containers. Well, that would happen again. And do we really want that for our future? Because once we head down this road and the money starts pouring in to legislators, as Kevin has said, you never can set up guardrails. You never can set up potency rules. All of those rules are going to go out the window once the money starts flowing. So we don't need to take this step. Our economy is in a precarious situation now, particularly with Maui. let's wait a few more years. Keep studying this. Let's see what happens. All the information we're getting is bad. Every few days, there's a new article in the paper or from JAMA, about more studies being done showing, schizophrenia, showing the car crashes, showing emergency room visits. All the news is bad.
So many issues flow out of that. I mean, for example, would you, same question I asked Vicky, would you see a time when it was safer, when you might modify your position? Is there any set of circumstances that would cause you to agree with those who want recreational marijuana?
And it's not the marijuana of people's childhoods. And I think that is a big stumbling block. It's a different drug when it's 30, 40, 50% THC and 90% concentrate. So it's impossible to make a drug more available and for it to be done safely. I just don't see it. Like I said, the situation is not broken now.
We've made a couple of references in this discussion about the situation now and the state of the law now. And you actually don't go to jail now.
We don't see those cases at all. It's decriminalized. So if somebody gets cited, it's a civil, I think it's $130 fine. It's a civil thing. It has nothing to do with our office. It's not prosecuted at all. It's been decriminalized. So, like I say, it's been decriminalized. People can get it if they want it. There's medical marijuana. It should be done with a doctor's assistant. But that's the status quo at the moment. And no matter what, if you legalize it, usage goes up, the black market increases. I think some people have this wrong idea that if you make it legal, everybody's going to go to the store. They're going to go where it's cheapest. And that means the black market.
Well, that does reflect on, your motivation. If it's not happening, if this does not affect the office of the prosecutor, then you come at it from a purely public policy point of view. What is best for the community, and it doesn't matter to your office because it's not happening in your office. Am I right?
Yes, it's not a workload issue at all. I mean, we're trying to focus on protecting society, keeping people safe, restoring trust to our part of the world, the prosecutors and government in general. It's just when you do some research and look at it, it's alarming. It's bad in so many layers. And we don't want to change Hawaii. We want to keep it as it is, make it better, not go in the wrong direction. It's just, let's keep Hawaii, Hawaii.
So looking at the legislature in 2024, there is a fair chance, you'll have to agree, that those people who are lobbying for recreational marijuana could prevail with the powers that be. But query, what kind of events could intervene between now and then to change that possibility? For example, I'm a young fellow. I've had some marijuana. I get into a horrendous car crash, and there's loss of life in my car crash, and it is clearly determined that I was on weed at the time, serious weed, potent weed. That would affect the public view of this, wouldn't it?
I think it would, but I think they'd say, well, that's just 1 in a million. It could happen. There are more accidents with alcohol. And comparing it to alcohol, let's not add another problem. That's where I think that comparison really fails. Let's not add another problem to what we currently have. But I really think when the governor and the legislators look at our tourist economy, if for no other reason, I don't think they want to have on their watch and their actions to put a harpoon into our visitor industry. I just think when they get educated about the facts, and the visitor industry is speaking up now, they were in force at that event we had, but they're going to be testifying at the legislature. They're going to be trying to make their feelings known that you could lose our Japanese tourists. You could, the consul general from Korea came to pay a courtesy call on me. He is adamant against this and will speak out publicly about it. All of those groups from Japan, they know that this is going to really hurt our industry here. It's going to hurt our visitors. the economic numbers I saw in the paper this morning, the Council of Revenue's projections are going down, especially now with Maui. This is the last time to take a chance on losing our Asian visitors and family visitors from everywhere. They're not going to want to come here if you smell weed everywhere. They just will not.
We have to be strong. We have to be moral. We can't compromise, and we can't let, tragedies like Maui cause us to compromise on basic principles and basic brands. But I think we're almost out of time. I want to offer you that, whatever you wanted to say, but also an opportunity to summarize the discussion.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you, Steve Alm, for your sharing all these thoughts. Besides the impact to the state, more important to me as a mother, as a grandmother, my compelling argument will be think of our children, because they need all the tools to succeed in life today. We don't need to give them one more tool that's going to drag them down. And truly, legalizing marijuana will just be another problem that we're going to be dealing with that impact generations to come. That to me is front and center of why I'm so opposed to this.
We certainly appreciate you coming on, Vicky, and expressing the views of a concerned citizen, a concerned, sophisticated citizen, if I may. And Steve, we really appreciate you taking these positions. The moral position is not necessarily in your wheelhouse. It is a statement that anyone in the state could make and maybe should make. And I hope that they were listening. I hope that they will listen and do listen to these concerns. It's an attitudinal thing. As you have mentioned, as you both have mentioned, it's a branding thing for Hawaii. We can't compromise on these basic issues. So Steve, let me offer you an opportunity also to leave a message with our audience.
Okay, we will try to educate legislators, hope they're open-minded about it. Same thing with Governor Green on many different areas. But what should be the end of the discussion is there's no state that depends on tourism like we do. It is our lifeblood. 70% of the dollars in Maui come from tourism. If we are taking a chance on doing something that could really hurt our economic engine that drives the whole state, that should be the end of the discussion. And we are hearing from folks, we're going to hear from them a lot more from the visitor industry involved in Japan, saying they will stop coming here. That should be the end of the discussion, because the other side has nothing to offer except the promise of money, which when you balance out with all of the other problems means even that argument failed. Let's not take a chance with our economic engine. Let's keep Hawaii, Hawaii.
And let's stay healthy. This is really important. Steve Alm, prosecuting attorney for the city and county of Honolulu, and Vicky Cayetano, concerned citizen, former First Lady. Thank you so much for appearing on our show. Aloha.